I was asked to talk a little bit about the response to the XL shooting in Hesston. This happened in February 2016. XL is a manufacturer in Hesston. They make lawnmowers and other lawn and garden type equipment. Hesston is a small town just northwest of Newton. Newton is a community of about 20,000. Hesston is about 2,700. And so I was asked to serve as PIO in the response after this workplace shooting alongside the PIO from the Harvey County Sheriff's Department. So this happened on a Thursday evening. It started with Cedric Ford, who was an employee at XL, was served with a protection from abuse order from his girlfriend at about 3:30 in the afternoon. He was served at work by the sheriff's office. And then at about 4:30 in the afternoon, his employers noticed that he had failed to return from his scheduled break at work. What happened was that he had returned to his home in Newton. Newton and Hesston are about 10 minutes apart. He had returned to his home in Newton, retrieved some weapons, and headed back toward Hesston. At 4:57 is when Harvey County Dispatch got the first report of a shooting. Cedric Ford was in his vehicle headed back toward Hesston and started shooting at oncoming cars. The first shooting was reported at 12th and Meridian in Newton. And then minutes later, a second shooting at Meridian and Hesston Road. We found out later that he was attempting to carjack vehicles. We really don't understand why, but he was shooting at people from his vehicle, shooting at oncoming traffic, and wound up stealing a car from one of those people that he shot. He then returned to XL and started shooting at people in the parking lot. He was essentially shooting at anyone he saw, anyone he encountered. He went inside the facility and started shooting at the employees who were on duty there. The first officer on the scene was Hesston Police Chief Doug Schrader. And Doug entered the facility without backup, went in, found Mr. Ford, and shot and killed him. It all happened extremely quickly. It was less than 20 minutes from start to finish. But in that time, 3 XL employees were killed by Cedric Ford and 14 other people were injured, including some of the people he shot on the road in Newton. It was estimated that there were about 400 employees in the building at the time. XL is one of the larger employers in Harvey County. They have over 1,000 employees. So if you're not as familiar with Harvey County, this is kind of the lay of the land. You can see where the first, second, and third shots happened. These are the 3 people that lost their lives that day. And I will say that at least one of the 14 people who was injured that day later committed suicide. We recognize that this was an extremely traumatic event, and it left lasting scars on the people who experienced it. So I got the call to come to Hesston to help with the media. We did our first briefing shortly thereafter at 6:30. Sheriff T. Walton was selected to be the spokesperson for this event. He's the gentleman in the back with the big mustache. We went to a park shelter in Hesston to do these briefings. You can see that at this time it was just a small group of our local media who were there. The bald gentleman in the back is Doug Schrader. At this time, the details were really murky about what had happened. We were still trying to piece together exactly the sequence of events, and Doug probably should not have been there. Doug was, involved in this officer-involved shooting at this point, but we didn't even know at that point that Doug was the officer who had taken out the suspect. So we were really unorganized at this time, and we were just trying to give the media some kind of statement. In some cases, the media had more details about this than we did at the time. You can imagine there were 400 employees at Excel at the time, all of them with their own social media accounts, and they were putting out their own personal statements about what they had seen and heard. And so it was a lot of rumors at that time, and we didn't have a lot of great information about what really happened. So we did a second briefing that evening at 9 o'clock. We were starting to get more media members there. Some clearer details were starting to emerge. We printed out as much information as we could on maps and charts. We tried to create some kind of timeline. This is when we really started getting hammered by the national media. So ABC News, CNN, NBC News, all those national outlets started calling. We didn't have any kind of infrastructure in place to handle that. So we were getting messages from dispatch to call back media. We had essentially commandeered Hesston City Hall to serve as our command post, but they did not have nearly the amount of phones and printers and computers and that sort of thing that we really needed. So we were using our personal cell phones to call back national media and trying to handle that as best we could. In the meantime, as part of the law enforcement investigation, we had our emergency response team, our local SWAT team, called to the shooter's home in Newton. He lived in this mobile home. And the SWAT team arrived, and they could hear loud music coming from inside the house. They talked to some neighbors who said that Mr. Ford might have had a roommate. There was a truck in the driveway. So they didn't know if they were dealing with possibly a second suspect inside the house. They didn't know if there could possibly be booby traps or other kinds of devices inside the house. Other mass shooters have done that sort of thing. So they were treating this as a possibly barricaded subject. I got a call from our SWAT team leader saying, could I come to Newton and help with the media at this site because all of their other assets were in Hesston. And I had to say, no, I'm sorry, I can't because I'm in Hesston. And so they had the news media on scene here trying to watch this SWAT team deployment, and they were live streaming video of the SWAT team outside the house. So this was obviously a very dangerous situation. If there had been someone inside the house, this could have been really dangerous. We had news media trying to get much too close to the house. It was after dark, so they were trying to get good shots. We had one TV crew up on the roof of a building next door trying to get good shots of our SWAT team members. It was just a really bad situation. There wound up being some pretty tense confrontation between our police officers and the news media. They didn't really have someone there who could mediate the situation. I wound up getting a call from one of the local TV news directors that night, extremely angry about how her reporters had been treated. And I wound up having to sort of mediate that conversation from Hesston. So we really could have used additional PIO support to help with that. At about midnight that night, Melissa, the sheriff's office PIO, and I went home. And overnight is when all the national media flew in to Wichita. So when we arrived Friday morning at about 5 a.m., all the national media was there. It just so happened that right across the street from the XL plant was a big empty lot. And this was quite fortuitous because it made a perfect media staging area. They were away from the building and out of the way. They had lots of room for their satellite trucks, as you can see, but they could get great shots of the XL plant with police tape in the background of their live shots. So they just found this on their own when they showed up overnight. So the sheriff and Melissa went out on scene Friday morning to do these live interviews. Sheriff Walton had gone home at about 2 a.m. and probably got very little sleep, came back out at 5 a.m. to do these live interviews and did a fantastic job. But he was doing these pre-dawn interviews. It was about 18 degrees outside with very little sleep. But he took the time to do one-on-one statements with each of these news media. He wouldn't have had to do that. He could have, gotten them all together and said, I'm saying this once, get it or not. But later we felt like that was a pretty good investment in relationship building with these media members. I think there was an understanding that they were going to be with us for the next couple of days, and giving them some good one-on-one time and camera time with him was, we felt like, a good investment in that relationship. So this is what it looked like on Good Morning America.
All that, but we begin on a deadly serious note. That rampage overnight in Kansas, where a gunman killed 3 people, injured 14, before he was shot dead in a showdown with police. ABC's Clayton Sandell is on the scene in Hesston, Kansas. Good morning, Clayton.
Hey, good morning, George. Behind me, you can see the factory here where this all took place. Normally, they make lawnmowers here, but this morning, it is a massive crime scene. Horrifying moments as gunfire erupts in a small Kansas community.
The gun was strapped to him. He was ready to go.
Just before 5 p.m. Thursday, officials say 38-year-old Cedric Ford started his shooting rampage, first firing shots at random drivers, wounding 2 in separate locations. Minutes later, Ford heads to Excel Industries in Hesston, where he worked, armed with a rifle and handgun. He shoots 1 person in the parking lot before going inside the industrial plant and opening fire on his co-workers.
And then I seen a mob of people just start running out saying, run, run, and a pop, 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 pop.
Witnesses say Ford kept shooting until the first officer to arrive on scene took him down.
Even though he took fire, he went inside of that place and saved multiple lives. A hero, as far as I'm concerned.
In the end, 4 people, including the gunman, are killed. At least 14 are wounded. 2 medical choppers and 15 ambulances responded, along with SWAT teams surrounding the plant as nearly 150 employees finally flee the building. Friends and family outside waiting to find out if their loved ones were okay.
Oh my God! Oh my God!
The shooter has an extensive criminal record, including arrests for burglary, battery, and concealed firearms. Posting this picture and this video on Facebook in September, firing an AK-style. Now, just moments ago, I talked to the sheriff here who tells me that an hour and a half before the shootings, Ford was served with a restraining order meant to keep him away from a girlfriend, and investigators say that may have been one of the things that pushed him over the edge. Amy?
So we had scheduled a news briefing for 8:30 a.m. Friday morning, the next morning. Like I said, we had gone home at about midnight. And like I said, we had been using our personal cell phones to return calls. So we did not have any kind of overnight support lined up. And so my phone continued to ring all throughout the night from news media across the nation. And we had left with, like I said, no support of any other overnight PIO and no communication really with law enforcement who was going to remain on scene. So unbeknownst to us, the KBI requested a PIO from the FBI to come in. And so this FBI PIO arrived overnight and essentially took charge, started redoing a lot of the work that we had done the previous day, started writing press releases that we had already written the previous day, and kind of commandeered the sheriff and said, "You're coming with me, I'm doing this news briefing, I will get you ready for this." So this was the briefing we had that morning. This briefing is actually in the basement of the law enforcement center in Newton. The sheriff had wanted to move the news briefings to Newton because that's where his office was, even though it made no sense to make all these media members drive to Newton from Hesston. There was nothing in Newton for them to cover, so that was probably a mistake, but I think generally speaking, we underestimated the coverage this was going to get, the attention it was going to get the night before. So we went ahead and had this news briefing in Newton. You can see we had quite a crowd. One of the unfortunate things that happened, because this out-of-town PIO came in with no communication with us, they brought out this map and she labeled it with the sites of the shootings for the sheriff to use as a visual aid during the briefing, and she rotated it 90 degrees and hung it on the wall with these labels. So we had our sheriff standing in front of a map that's sideways. And so Hesston is now northeast of Newton instead of northwest of Newton. So that was a little bit embarrassing. But there was definitely some turf issues with this FBI PIO coming in. We also had some issues with communication with other agencies in the county. You think about the school district in Hesston, the college in Hesston, the school district in Newton. There were a lot of other agencies that had issues. There was Newton Medical Center, who took some of the victims. There was the different law enforcement agencies that were involved. And so we had a lot of agencies and we didn't have a lot of coordination between them about putting out messages. So we had attempted to create a joint information center. But unfortunately, a lot of those other agencies didn't understand incident command system and the idea of a PIO even. So they didn't realize that they should contact us. And we didn't necessarily know who their spokespeople were. So there was really a communication breakdown among the different agencies. But we did attempt at this point to try and contact all those folks who had their own messages that needed to get out. But again, we had technology issues. We didn't have enough phones, computers, Wi-Fi was an issue. The FBI PIO essentially declined to work with us. And then the governor showed up.
lives.
Doug Schroeder is Hesston's police chief. Governor Brownback, Congressman Mike Pompeo, and Attorney General Derek Schmidt met here at Hesston's municipal building to hear the latest on the investigation. The governor candidly talks about Chief Schroeder's actions, saying Schroeder risked his own life to charge into the Excel plant to pursue the active shooter Ford.
But apparently he chased him into the building, and without his aggressive response, a lot more people are at risk.
Dozens of federal, state, and local law enforcement are teaming up on this investigation. Attorney General Derek Schmidt reminding us this is still an ongoing investigation and more details will be coming out. But now we know who put an end to the rampage.
But it sure looks like this could have been a much larger tragedy had the police chief and others not engaged rapidly and not even waiting on backup, but it should probably be more normal calls to get backup, just charge into it, which is...
He knew it was an active...
Yeah, but not waiting for backup like the governor says, which might have been protocol, but he knew it was an active situation and lives had to be saved. Congressman Mike Pompeo also here echoing the governor's remarks, calling Chief Schroeder a real hero. And after talking, Congressman Pompeo, after talking with Schroeder's coworkers, the coworkers told him that, hey, they weren't surprised that the chief had these actions in running in there. They say that that's just the way the hardworking chief is. That's the kind of man he is, and so people here who know him just aren't really that surprised.
All right, Chris, thank you.
So if you're familiar with officer-involved shootings, generally speaking, we wouldn't release the name of the police officer, and we were not prepared to do that at this point. The KBI investigation was still ongoing. And we were not confirming to the news media who the officer was that took out the suspect. So there was no coordination with the governor's office about what kind of statement he should make or what kind of information was okay for him to release. We were not, the PIOs were not even told that the governor was coming. So we didn't have that opportunity to coordinate. And the governor just decided to release Chief Schroeder's name. So at that point, we had to scramble a little bit, make sure Doug knew that the word was out, and make sure that he was protected somewhat. You might think that this is a situation where he clearly did the right thing and he wouldn't be criticized by the public for a deadly shooting like this, but he did in fact get some blowback, and his family was targeted online for some things. So it was unfortunate that he wasn't sort of prepared for that to happen. So we did our next news briefing at 3 o'clock Friday afternoon. At this point, you see the guys in the yellow vests. We had called in a partial incident management team from the state to come in and help us with managing the incident. For this briefing, we had representatives of from the ATF, the KBI, the sheriff's office, and then we brought in the city manager, the city administrator from Hesston. At this point, we were ready to start transitioning this more to the recovery stage. The law enforcement portion was essentially the investigation would continue, but we weren't going to have a lot more news to give out to the public from the law enforcement side. So unfortunately for this press conference, the FBI PIO was preparing and briefing the law enforcement representatives, and we were trying to get the city administrator ready. And there was very little coordination, again, between the two of us. The city administrator was very interested in starting to get the locals' faces out there. He wanted to make sure that the residents of Hesston understood that their local officials were doing work on their behalf, and that things were under control. he really wanted a chance to get some FaceTime with the media so that his folks would see him. The law enforcement representatives had decided at this briefing not to take any questions. They didn't tell us that, the PIOs, ahead of time, and the city administrator really wanted a chance to take questions. So unfortunately, there was some miscommunication there, and they stood up at the end and said, "We're not taking questions, that's it." We were able to get one of our local news reporters, pulled her aside afterwards and said, "Hey, the city administrator would like a chance to talk and answer questions if you're interested." And then he was able to get some FaceTime then after the fact. But after this news conference, the FBI PIO just disappeared. There was also an ATF PIO who was there, who again did not really coordinate with us when he was there, but they went ahead and issued a news release about the girlfriend of the shooter being charged. She had purchased the weapons that were used in the shooting from a pawn shop. I believe they were her weapons that were his, that she had pawned, and he forced her to go and retrieve them from the pawn shop. And she was charged with providing weapons to a felon. And but then again, this was news that we simply received. We were not able to coordinate on this one either.
Mayor of Hesston spoke tonight at the vigil for the victims. Mayor David Kaufman was contacted by President Obama earlier today to discuss the tragic shootings. Now, during his speech at the vigil tonight, he thanked first responders for their bravery and said the community is blessed to have them. He also spoke to the families of those affected by this tragedy.
We just want to be here and let you know that you are loved and you're a part of this community. And we will continue to be here for you as we go on. So God bless all of you.
The mayor also encouraged.
So at this point, we realized that the investigation piece is going to continue kind of in the background. We don't have a lot of new information to keep releasing to the public about what happened or details of the shooting. It's kind of all taken care of by now. But we've got this community who's hurting. We've got this community who's thinking, okay, now what? And so our incident management team essentially decided we need to help this community heal and move forward in some way. They're hurting. They're eager to find ways to help. They're eager to find ways to come together and heal and move forward as a community. And so we essentially tried to create a marketing campaign to help with that healing process. So in the hours really after the shooting happened, there was a Hesston resident who created a webpage, hestonstrong.com, and he created a Facebook page and had set up this hashtag HesstonStrong. And we knew this had happened, and we kind of watched it happen, but we weren't really involved in it. It was sort of a grassroots effort. And so we decided, since this was already there, it had already been created, that we would invite him in and ask him to be part of the PIO support team. We also asked a local marketing firm in Newton to come in and create some marketing material, photography, and videos that we could use in this effort. And so we created this sign. This banner was created by a local print shop in Hesston. It utilizes the Hesston High School colors, red and white, as well as the Newton High School colors of black and gold. And that gold too is the color of the Hustler mowers that XL manufacturers. So that was intentional. Understanding, we chose the Hesston Strong hashtag because that was already existing, but there was an awareness that this was very much a county-wide incident. Most of the employees of Hesston actually live in Newton, and the shooter lived in Newton. You know, he had a family. He had kids in the Newton school system. The very first shootings on the road happened in Newton, very close to Newton High School. Everybody in Newton knows somebody who works at XL. So this was not just a Hesston event. So we were intentional about that. So we printed these, we called up the print shop, got an emergency run, put it on banners, put it on signage, and we tried to blanket the town essentially with these signs. These are the marketing guys who created some of this material. The man on the right is the guy who created the website, Steve Owens. He's actually one of our state representatives now. At the time he wasn't, but so these are the guys that helped us out with this. They created this campaign for everyone to put their Hustler mowers out on their yards with banners or supportive signage. And so everybody had their mowers out. Newton Medical Center changed their sign to just be static. We are Hesston Strong. We tried to get this everywhere. We had the cheerleaders come out and spell it out in the fences at the schools. This was at a high school basketball game. So we're trying to promote these kind of positive healing messages. So at 4 p.m. Saturday, we scheduled another briefing, and this was just with our local folks. So we had the mayor, the city administrator, and the school superintendent from Hesston. And so this was a time for them to be pushing those positive, caring messages and push the critical incident stress management events that we had set up. We had worked with some of the local churches and our local mental health providers to offer these sort of community open counseling. You could just show up and get some kind of counseling support. It was for the public. So they were highlighting, and then of course we had separate events specifically for our first responders as well. So they were pushing those messages. We did have one incident at this news briefing. We did not coach these guys well enough about an exit strategy, kind of like how to end a news conference. So they wound up talking a little bit too long, and the news reporters at this point were kind of looking for anything new that they could talk about this incident. So we did have our school superintendent accidentally told the news media about some student volunteers that were, some high school volunteers that were working with Hesston EMS. And he told them that they had actually responded to the shooting. And so he gave their names, and so we had to then scramble to let our EMS chief know, hey, he accidentally gave the names of these student volunteers to the media. We want to make sure they don't show up at their doorsteps with microphones and cameras. We were able to tell the news media at that point, hey, our policy is that we do not allow volunteers to give interviews. It turned out that the kids were not actually, didn't actually respond to the shooting, but this was a good example of how they went off script a little bit because we gave them just a little bit too much time, and they were trying to fill the silence with the information they had. On Sunday, we were asked to help put together a town hall meeting. This again was an example of the local folks wanting to get in front of their people and sort of reassure their public that their local officials were working on their behalf and had things under control, and that the town was being taken care of. So we did this at Hesston High School, and you can see the city administrator there in the middle. It was a fairly decent turnout. There was some concern that a town hall meeting could go off the rails, that there could be a lot of negative questions or accusations thrown out. And there really wasn't. It stayed very positive. In general, these were Hesston residents who were interested and caring and wanted to be there for their community. These were not necessarily victims' families who were angry. So it went very well. The PIO team helped with making sure the media knew and understood the logistics of this. And at this point, we had lost a lot of the national media. They had left, but we still had a few stragglers from the national media. And then, of course, our local folks were still there. And then on Sunday, we were asked to help a little bit with the logistics for a prayer service. And this was planned by the local ministerial alliance. And this too was held at Hesston High School. And they had a very good turnout. Our whole incident management team attended, just in solidarity with the community. Both of these events were just positive kind of healing events. We were able to hand out Hesston Strong flyers to people and kind of push those positive messages. So the other issue that came up then, after, Doug's name was out there as being the hero who took down this shooter, but then the question became, at what point do we bring Doug into the conversation? We were getting pretty hounded by the national media with requests for an interview. He had the national news outlets wanting to fly him to New York for one-on-one exclusive interviews. He really had no interest in doing that. He, of course, did not want to get a bunch of fanfare making this about him. He's a very humble person. But then it became, well, should he do an interview with the local media, or should he release a written statement, or should he do nothing? There was a lot of debate about this. Doug indicated that he did want to put out some kind of statement or do some kind of news conference. But there were many folks who thought, no, we can't do that. He's not ready. They were looking out for his mental health. They were afraid he would get skewered by somebody, or this would put him in the spotlight too much. So this was a big debate. We wound up releasing a written statement, and the news media read it, and it went very well. Doug really wanted to thank his fellow first responders and thank the community for the support, and express his faith, because that was really important to him. And in the weeks and months that followed, he did get a little bit of fanfare. He was able to throw out the first pitch at a Royals game, and he was invited to go to Chiefs draft night. So he did get to do some fun things in recognition of his bravery. And then last year, he actually received the Medal of Valor from the president. So he did that last year. Well deserved. The other issue that we had to come up on was the 911 calls. We started getting requests from the media for release of the 911 tapes almost immediately. And of course, you may understand that in an incident like this, there were dozens of 911 calls. Our dispatch was completely full. All the lines were full from folks calling 911. So they were slammed, and we had so many calls, and they needed to be redacted for HIPAA and other privacy information. So it took us a while. Of course, we had to follow Kansas Open Records Act. I know probably this is something that Sedgwick County has to deal with all the time, but for Harvey County, it was new. And so we had to figure out whose job this was. Was this the PIO's job? Was this dispatch's job? So there were a lot of logistics there. We also recognized that releasing these 911 tapes was going to, in some ways, re-traumatize folks from this incident, because they are, you know, scary sounding. So we tried to wait a little bit until things had settled down a little bit, and we tried to spin it in a way that it would be a more positive story. So what we did was we used it as a way to recognize our dispatchers. So we set up a little news briefing with the dispatchers who were on duty that night and allowed them to get some kudos for their work.
Well, as you can imagine, the phones were ringing off the hook in the Harvey County Communications Center. The dispatchers say it was experience and training that kept them calm as these phone calls were coming in.
Harvey County 911.
We need police to XL Industries. A guy just popped out with an AK-47 and started shooting.
Okay, where are you at?
XL Industries in Hesston.
You're at XL?
Yes.
Has anybody been hit?
More than 40 calls from victims came flooding into the Harvey County Communications Center after a man opened fire at Excel Industries.
There were so many calls that were coming in that, at least from my perspective, I didn't have time to really, give out all the help that I wanted to.
That's the shooter at Excel Industries. We have multiple injuries.
This group of dispatchers says through the chaos, training kept them focused.
You don't think about it.
You don't feel them right away. I think there's so much going on, so involved, that the magnitude of the event does not hit you until later. For me, I just went on autopilot.
These dispatchers giving medical instructions to help the injured at Excel, and all the while trying to get more information about the shooter.
And I think remembering to ask about the shooter is so very important, and that was, you're going to have more victims if you don't stop that person.
When told some may consider them heroes for their actions, this group said they were just doing their job.
I don't look at myself like that, I had a job to do, and I came in and I did it, and that's what I'm here for.
The Harvey County dispatchers told us since the shooting, they've received a flood of support from all across the country. They said they've gotten a lot of care packages.
So our dispatchers are really behind the scenes in their comfort zone. So they weren't necessarily eager to participate in this, but they were good sports, and it really did put more of a positive spin on it than just the sort of salaciousness of the 911 tapes. So some other lessons learned, I think, in this incident. Preparedness, we talk about that all the time, and I think generally speaking, before this incident, when we did exercises and practiced our crisis communications, we focused on weather events and flooding, tornadoes, ice storms, that sort of thing. I personally had not practiced active shooter situation. We didn't have active shooter procedures, policies in place at most of our places of business and agencies. So it was actually, I think, the month of the shooting in February 2016, our emergency manager had asked Doug Schrader to head up a task force to work on active shooter preparedness. And it was just, I think, like a week later that this incident happened. So since then, we have done a tremendous amount of work in Harvey County. to make sure all our schools and hospitals and government agencies, healthcare, all have policies in place and have gone through trainings and that sort of thing. And we've started rolling it out to the business community and places of worship as well. Incident command system works. It was actually pretty remarkable to watch it sort of unfold in real life the way it does when you're doing an exercise. But people have to know it and have to follow it. And so we did a ton of just-in-time training. There were so many people involved with this response who didn't know what ICS was. And so we have really expanded our ICS training in Harvey County and making sure even our non-governmental partners understand what it is and how they would fall into that framework. PIOs matter a lot. I think, you know, it can be easy to think that the real work is done by the first responders, and I don't disagree with that, but I think this incident really brought home to our local people that the PIOs do a lot of work in an incident like this, and you need people who know what they're doing and are trained. So since this incident happened, our county added a PIO position. They did not have a PIO on staff before this. We also created the Harvey County PIO working group. And so that brings together everyone in the county who has public information or communications as one of their job duties. And so now we know all the people from the schools and the colleges and the hospitals and the libraries and all of those major industries that have those folks, and we know their names and we know their contact information for when the time comes. It's been really a great networking tool. And then we did bring in, we hosted a basic PIO course in Harvey County right after this incident as well, to make sure that the folks from the hospitals and the colleges and the school districts all understood what it means to be a PIO within ICS. We've improved our mobility somewhat in terms of making sure we all have go bags that have computers, Wi-Fi, printers, making sure we know, you know, our email list for the media and that sort of thing, that we're better prepared when an incident happens and we're not be able to work in our offices. And then community giving issues. Somehow this became an issue that we had to deal with that we didn't anticipate. When an incident like this happens, people want to do something. They want to help somehow. And so they're looking for ways to do something. And so we not only got, you know, cases of bottled water showing up at the command post, but also people wanted to give. And so people were setting up GoFundMe accounts, and it became an issue because we were getting questions about what's the official way to donate, what is the recommended way to donate. And it's going to be easier if you are prepared for that and address it early, find out ahead of time where people are supposed to give money, so that you don't wind up with people giving money to places that maybe they shouldn't. So this is a video that one of the videos our marketing team put together. Sorry, that's so
They have done that very well.
And this is a video that Channel 12 put together. I thought they did a really nice job. And, you know, I have to say, with all the national media that were here and all the locals that were here, they did a really nice job. We didn't have any conflicts, really, even with the national media. They were extremely polite. And, you know, I've heard other colleagues talk about a lot of conflicts with the media, and I don't know why exactly what was the difference for us, but they were generally very sympathetic and considerate while they were here. And so I just like this video that Channel 12 put together that shows kind of the sequence of events and how things played out over those several days.
We're glad we got the chance to show that to you. Here's a look back at the past few days in the Hesston community.
I saw that he had a big machine gun. I went blank. What do I do? And I could hear my ear pop.
I saw the shooter stop his truck, open his door, hop out, shoot someone down, and then he went straight into the building.
And the guy I was working with ran by me, grabbed me by my shirt, and says, "Come on, run, there's a shooter." And it just kind of took me by surprise. And I heard a pop, 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 pop.
So I went to make sure people on the lines were all evacuating, and I ran right into the shooter. He shot me 4 times.
And then you took the gun and put it to the robot tech's head, and the robot tech said, "Please don't." And we're all terrified. And he doesn't do it. And I'm pretty sure he walked out the door.
Drove right past me. I was sitting in my pickup. But why he didn't shoot, I'll never know. But thank God I have a 2-week-old baby at home and a wife that I love very much.
He did actually point it at me too. I don't know if it was just empty or he jammed or whatever not, but I'm very lucky to be here with my family and friends. So
you could hear the officer saying, "Come out, come out, come out," and then that's when 8 or 10 shots rung out.
I don't know what he was going through, but obviously he felt this was the way out, and so my heart just aches.
He received a phone call stating that there was a mass shooting at XL, and he tried to call out there. And knowing that my son works out there and that my sister-in-law works out there, tried to call, and he didn't answer, and I tried to call her, and she didn't answer. When I seen him, I just started freaking out, you know, because that's my son. Not knowing the actual damage, not knowing if he's going to be able to walk. And he kept saying, "I'm alive, Mom, I'm alive."
How's your husband doing? Because you were able to talk to him.
Yeah, I was able to talk to him. He said he's okay. He did say somebody next to him got shot. Oh my God! Oh my God!
You can come in here.
Goes out, our heart goes out to them, so the ones that were lost.
Somebody got shot, and he went to help him, and that's when the shooter got hit. I'm awful proud of him. I don't like losing my son, but he was doing what he felt he had to do.
And I don't think that people understand how it feels to have somebody ripped away from you, that you don't even get to say goodbye.
He was wonderful.
but a lot of people loved him. It's just he had an infectious personality, you know.
You always say when it happens somewhere else, it can't happen here. Well, it has happened here. And now we have to deal with that.
We're ready to begin, but begin is the word. It's going to be a long journey. And there will be ups and downs along the journey. And we hope what we're doing tonight is we're not going to bring any sense of closure tonight. It's let's open the door for the healing journey to begin.
So this was obviously a really traumatic event for the community. One of the things also that came out of this was that we were able to get some grant funding from the federal government to establish a resiliency center. And so that is an outlet for people to be able to get counseling services and other kinds of support. You don't have to have been a victim, you know, you didn't have to be there at the time. This is the type of incident that can be traumatic to the entire community. So that is a resource that we still have here in Harvey County. And I think it's been 4 years now, and it still feels really fresh in a lot of ways. So that's it for me in my presentation.